yours.
Great. Thank you so much, Anna-Sophie and Anna, for organizing this tremendously entertaining and super interesting event. And just before I get going and share my PowerPoint, I might have to switch the presenters. We have to do a bit of housekeeping, I guess, to make sure that you can properly see it. If my connection drops out, because I'm in the middle of what is the NBN, the Australian Wi-Fi desert. So I'm very sorry if you can't hear me for one minute, please just let me know and then we can go back. To any and all, welcome. I'm here in Sydney, in an area called Glebe, from the Gadigal country of the Ora Nation, never ceded, always was, always will be. Thank you very much for tuning in, as they say. So just very quickly, so I'm working on popular culture, so that's really my area of interest. I've been working on how, for instance, with my book, how migrants who have been a part of German culture and society for 60 years, how they can, how they could actually be seen as full members of society and how they could get that message across. So I think what really interests me when Anna-Sophie invited me, and so we've been working on other things together, but what really drew me to this was, how do you communicate these difficult messages? How do you really talk about that? And because I saw that another paper is talking about the plasmaticity of feeling and something I was going to mention, I might just take a bit of a turn and focus more a bit on the idea of feeling. And what I would say is the sort of the culture tech of relationality. So how can these things make us feel something for them? So how can eyes, this anthropomorphic idea, this construct, this very sort of nebulous, vague thing, how can we feel something? And what I've done in other research publications and things, I thought about humor, entertainment, millions of eyes and ears and people watching these things, and they feel so much for them. How does it work? How do you create that? So that kind of drove me here to this frozen panel. I think we've got, it's all frozen, it's frozen solid, more ice than I've ever seen in my time in Australia. So let's just get going. And again, at any point might be a bit hodgepodgey. As I said, I'm not in the ice field, but I'm really interested in the culture technique of drawing attention and communicating a message. And I'm right now working on the Holocaust and how to communicate knowledge about the Holocaust to a lot of people. And this is also where I'm going to draw on something that a Jewish German refugee, exilee, first husband of Hannah Arendt, if you know her, cousin of Dr Benjamin, said about finding the right tone for the wrong ears. How do you do that? How do you find the right tone, the right message for the wrong ears so they become the right ears and the right hearts? How do you change that? So that's basically one of the things I'm looking at when I'm looking at pop culture. All right, let's get going. I'm going to share the screen. I hope that works. I might just have to switch. Once I've done that, switch things around. I've got a bit of audio and stuff. So let me just go full screen here and switch the views. So I hope now, Anna-Sophie, can you just let me know? Can you see the action? Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. So it's a tech millennial at work. Let me just quickly do all the things here, share the sound and all of that. There's a couple of things going on. All right. And yeah, at any point, if you have any questions, I see this more like an open sort of talk. If there's anything that you like to share or let me know, please just put it in the chat and you can just react to it. So I'm interested, and I've changed the title slightly, so I'm a bit naughty with that. So I'm interested in this idea of queering eyes and the culture tech of relationality and the plasmaticity of feeling. You're going to hear more about that, I think. And you've heard a couple of these things yesterday in the comics panel and in another. So I'm not going to belabor these points too much, hopefully, and let's see if we can get through everything. But I really wanted to just place this frozen story, and I guess most of you might have heard it and seen the film, just placing it in the larger context of what I'm calling this ice family of these fantastical powers. And there's, of course, there's the evil eyes. And if you can just read a couple of these quotes I put on the screen, you can see there's Sub-Zero from the computer game franchise that is Mortal Kombat right here. There's the Ice King, like the King of the White Walkers from Game of Thrones, Mr. Freeze, there's Professor Coulthard from the Care Bears, there's the Ice King from Adventure Time. So, and all of them, they're really touching on what we heard yesterday. They're touching on this idea of ice as kind of being frozen in a place of darkness, gloom and doom, and being very pessimistic, negative, all these negative, dead, cold associations that are being frequently linked to the idea of ice and what it means and what it stands for, and it becomes shorthand when you see these pop culture items. Most of them are for younger audiences or pop culture audiences across the world. So it's immediately recognizable, which I think is very much an interesting component of this culture tech of feeling, because it's so immediate. It immediately goes into your immediate sensational or sensory array of feelings. You know what cold feels like, you know that it's not maybe a feeling you want to have too long. So it's, I think, a really interesting way of connecting pop culture to the way that it feels to be on ice, have ice in your hand. So it's immediate connection that you make with these things. And a lot of times these fantastical powers, as we heard yesterday, are meant to indicate that ice is something more or less daunting. It's endangering life and it's sucking out all the warmth of your body, of your heart. If you go back to the origin story of each of these characters, Mr. Freeze lost the love of his life, the Adventure King, the Ice King in Adventure Time. The same story, the White Walker was turned into this kind of fantastic beast of ice and death, and he can resurrect other characters, create an army of the dead, of icy dead people. So again, this is really talking to a specific audience who is very familiar with that rhetoric of evil ice. Now, again, there's just this side and there's the other, and there's a very sort of black and white kind of story. So we're transitioning now from the ice family to what I call the nice family, the ones that have the heart melted. And these are characters, and I think that Frozen, in a very interesting change from the original storyline to the way it developed, Frozen took that kind of melting, that idea of changing hearts. They took that on. And I thought it was quite interesting, because if you can just think about the Sailor Moon franchise of characters like Amy here, Sailor Mercury, considered like very intellectual, very cold, distant ice queen. So there's a lot in the fandom that always points to that she needs to thaw, that she needs to melt, that she needs to have her heart warmed up, ideally by love and romance. You have, so let me look at my cheat sheet here, Toshiro Yagaya from the Bleach franchise. Again, the white hair, the blue eyes, and these ice wings that he has are his superpowers, and he's again coming across in the anime series that Bleach is. He's massively popular. He's coming across as a character that needs to warm up, that needs to have his heart thawed, and where ice is not this evil thing, where he's not coming from the place of total isolation, but ice is actually there to save his friends, save his fellow beings in society. So ice, just like in the case like with Amy here, it becomes something positive. It becomes something really beneficial to society. The same with Iceman from the Marvel Comics franchise and the X-Men. Again, a couple of these comic quotes, and also the broader TV franchise that I put here, from, as you can see here, Fairy Tail also. Let's not forget Grey, Fullbuster from the Fairy Tail anime franchise, also depicted as this dark and gloomy character who never can really feel anything until he meets another character that's like water-based, and so water and ice is the perfect harmony, and though they're kind of complementing each other. So they're getting into this idea of the romance, or, the love story, the unlikely love story, and melting his heart. So it kind of again shows you that ice can also be reinscribed. It can go from this cold, lonely, frozen place, from this ice queenish kind of isolation and desolation, become something really positive. So they can become some sort of positive ambassadorial structure or feeling, which I thought was quite interesting when I looked into it a bit more, which is getting us straight to the bigger question of how Elsa from Frozen, how she actually transitioned from this evil, the ice family, to the nice family. Because originally, if you go back to the original sources, there used to be this, it's very old fairy tales, particularly from the Nordic areas, and the Russian version actually of the Ice Queen, from let me just quickly check the facts, 1953, the Ice Queen from Russia, the first animation film that really talks about these feelings of isolation, the Ice Queen being in this desolate place, caught up in this ice palace. She's lost the love of her life and her heart is frozen in time and place. So ice again being connoted as a very sort of lonely, desolate feeling. This plasmatic, this tangible, this anthropomorphic thing that isolates you. So this is really, again, the shorthand of what it means to have a world of ice around you. Mind you, that's before the global warming kind of stuff comes in. So this is really about ice as something that is seen, still seen and felt, it's permanent. Now we make the shift to Elsa in Frozen about 60 or 70 years later. And just I took some still images from the film. This is the first one, Frozen 1. And just 7 years, 8 years now that came out. And you can see that now there's a whole shift. Ice again becomes nice. We're talking to her about nice ice, and she kind of lets us take part in that journey. She's, you know, having this moment of creationism. She's taking the Zeusian power of, you know, into Greek mythology. She's taken this moment of creation out of male hands, and she's basically reproducing. There's a really interesting article by it's from a book, an edited collection on the psychosocial benefits and effects of Disney. Just came out, I think, 2 years ago, and I can put the info in the chat later if anyone is interested. And they talk about how Elsa is, this nice ice, is appropriating all these positive male dominant qualities of, you know, feeling, of production, of being a hero, of creating, and she's living through that. And she's doing that not with her own body, but by thawing and by bringing back from this ice cold death her own sister. So it's also the first time that this story talks about the queering of ice, as in taking it out of the male, straight, hetero, patriarchal paradigm. And again, if you're into the film and the history of Disney, the film was in the making. It had been in the making for about 78 years. And they had originally planned to make Elsa the villain, but it didn't quite gel with the producers, Chris Buck, I think, and Jennifer Lee. And they then went to the film musician, the composers, and the Lopez duo, and then the whole different story, I guess. But they really wanted to reinscribe ice and this ambassadorial quality of what it can mean. It's not just the villainous aspect, it's really about rethinking how to queer, how to skew, how to make different this dominant paradigm, and how can you communicate that? And they thought they best do that by communicating a story of family, by communicating, and here we also go into the arc for Frozen 2, which is where a couple of these images, promotional images and still images out from, as you can see here, the plasmaticity of ice, where Elsa finds out that she's actually one of, spoilers I guess, that she's actually one of these like the intermediary between the spirits and the human realm, and kind of also playing into the indigenous sort of area here, where she's kind of making good on the violation of nature that her ancestors have caused, and she's like part of that actual tribe that her ancestors violated, and so she's kind of finding all that out about herself. And ice, again, is the one bridge. There's one place of feeling, the ambassadorial quality, the bridge that she needs to travel across that, and how's her to do that. Again, I might not go too much into detail about this idea of the plasmatics of ice. We might hear about, I think we will be hearing about that later, or maybe in the discussions. There's this theory by Sergei Eisenstein that really ice has, as an anthropomorphic animated embodiment of feeling, of showing that you can be more, that form is not static, that the connection between human and nature, between form and being, sein and being, it can be reinscribed, it can be imagined differently. And animation, this goes back to a lot of essays that he wrote and almost 80 years ago, that really redefined the way that you would think about animation as a medium of broad accessibility, where you can imagine all these flexible eyes, these morphable structures, which is interesting, I think, because again, it was really working, and it melted queer fan hearts quite a lot. So people were just gagging, and people were really getting on the fan train, and it became so massive, this franchise. It was just all over the place. Again, a bit on that in a moment, just looking at the time. And just to go back to this really quick, I think, again, there's the source actually that I mentioned. This is about the psychosociality of eyes. So Lauren Dundes and Al, they talked about that quite a lot in that chapter. And this is really making you feel a lot more about eyes. Like when Olaf dies, or when the parents are being brought back in this frozen phantom of ice, you can see that ice becomes such an emotional place. It becomes reinscribed, just as it has been in the real world. So people are really getting on board with this queering of ice, reinscribing it with feelings that before then were not really allowed to be even shown. So the boys dressing up with the dads for Halloween, or for even like, just outside walking around as Elsa. So this idea of having a female superhero with these ice powers is what I think Eisenstein really points to in like this essay series that has just been re-edited and came out, I think, only like 4 or 5 years ago. That it's really all about, we need to rethink the constraints of form, and ice is a very good medium to get us there. So thinking about what else can you be? What else can society be? And getting that message across. And just quickly throwing that to a point about what I would call the attention ecology, or what not I call, but Yves Citon, just an amazing book that he put out on the ecology of attention. Disney now is one of the major players, and they have done something with their attention platform. They've put a currency to it by creating this infrastructure with a metric of attention, likes, clicks, tweets. So they made it very possible, very easy to get this ecology of popular culture entertainment, to give it real currency in terms of attention. So people paying attention to this ambassadorial quality of ice and Elsa, which is why that on the back of that, you could, for instance, again, this was just because of yesterday's seminar that I thought about that. So now that you have the attention, how could you frame that in sort of a broader popular culture discourse, which is stronger? Global warming as ice magic. And I'm working on humor, so it's not all quite so serious. But also because people were crying. If you're watching reaction videos on YouTube, people just losing their shit, watching Olaf melt or saying this one line, some people are worth melting for. Again, memes, spoofs, drag performances. This has now become part of the international global culture paradigm. And just as it is with that, Disney, again, is masterfully aware of how to make that for all it's worth. So again, they have known for decades now about this cultural attention infrastructure, the ecology of across all these different languages. So the franchise of the attention for eyes is really very distinct, and it's quite prominently featured there. Again, just to throw this back to this idea of the plasmaticity of eyes, and eyes as this space and this place of feeling. The whole thing starts out by saying, is it like being like this ice creature? Is it like a curse, or is it a power you were born with? Just when you go to the queering idea, this is really trying to reinscribe what we feel about eyes. And this is just shorthand, for another sort of idea that comes with being different. I mean, the question when you go back is, do you feel anything more or less for Elsa than you would feel for a quote unquote like straight or non-different, non-other character, because of her ice powers and the isolation that she comes to enjoy when she says, the let it go thing. Just a couple of these questions. Or would we feel any more or less for Olaf than for the ice caps melting? Why do we feel more for that ice than the other one when it's melting? Because we have the attention ecology, because we are caught up in this huge plasmatic construct, this ice palace of feeling that Disney so masterfully created. I think when it comes to science communication, we can really learn still so much more from that kind of franchise structure. But again, in the end, and I think this is just where I'm going to end it, if that's okay. Oops. Is the queer audience not worth melting for? And this has been a huge backlash for what people would say was the queer baiting of Disney, getting all these attention, getting millions of eyes and billions of kids indoctrinated and now taking it back to this heteronormative place ending the second part of Frozen with like this view of a wedding, and it's like the same straight paradigm. So is it giving up a huge opportunity to communicate about the science of healing, communicate about different paradigms of non heteropatriarchal dominance? So again, that's it. I hope it made any kind of sense. I really enjoyed it, and thank you very much to NSLP and for doing all of this. Thanks.
Thank you very much.